Okay.
Sewer. And then our regular meeting is just gonna be kind of short.
Crappy meeting.
Who are we missing?
Mark and Liz.
Liz is here.
Oh,
Snuck
snuck
behind
in.
you.
Yeah, you,
Liz is here. Oh. Mark is not here.
You didn't want to get elected to anything, probably. I like him in absentee.
An intentional absence, huh? Okay. Well, I think we'll just get going. And proceed without Mark. So, this meeting of the Town of Camden Harbor Committee on Tuesday, September 17th, 2024 is called to order. This is This is a public meeting. Minutes are recorded. The meeting is broadcast on Zoom and recorded for YouTube replay. Please direct your comments through the chair. And today we have Jeremy, Richard, Steve Pixley, Liz, Ron, Susan, Stephen, Bob, and myself, Elliot. On the agenda today, we have election of officers. And the committee handbook describes that all committees annually elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary. And that means to me that we have new election in the following year. Does that make sense to everybody?
Annually.
It says annually. That hasn't been our practice.
Well, people can be reelected.
Yes, that's true, but we haven't actually had the,
we haven't gone through the motion.
hadn't gone through the motions. Right. And Bob, I thought maybe you could address how the rules of order apply to our election process.
I don't have any idea other than someone has to start it and you're the old guy, even though you are temporarily off. So I think you should just call for nominations.
Okay.
I think the name gets placed in nomination and then it's seconded and then discussion and then
Right.
proceed with that. And then if there's a second, we would have an election and if that doesn't.
For every nomination, there
Or
is
you can
a,
nominate a slate,
pardon?
a slate of officers.
Uh-huh.
And have that seconded.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Well, we have 3 officer positions, chair, vice chair, and secretary. Do we have nominations for chair?
I nominate Elliot for chair.
I have a question, Elliot. If a regular member is absent, is it your responsibility, you're supposed to appoint a sub to act as?
That's very, very good point, Stephen. We have 2 alternates present today. We have 1 voting member not present. I propose that we use the alternate in alphabetical order. So today there would be the first alphabetical person, and whenever this occurs, then it would be the next one. Does that sound fair, or
Sure.
is there another way that we can designate who the alternate is?
I mean, I'm happy to vote, but I know
No.
Stephen's been a little more involved in this meeting, so I'm also happy to pass it to him.
My concern is just that you have the right number of voting persons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, okay. Liz, are you saying that you choose to defer today? Or do you want to act as a voting member, which you're entitled to do?
Well, what's the alphabetical order here?
Well, the two alternates, the last names both begin
You
with
gotta know how to
G.
spell my last name though.
That's
I
why I
do,
wrote it down.
I do.
And pronounce it.
G-I,
Okay.
G-I and G-O.
I don't know, if we want to do a systematic and do it alternate every, it doesn't, that's fine if we just keep it that way, so it's fair, I suppose.
Okay, well, then you'll be the voting member today, Liz. Okay? All right, are there any other nominations for chair? Okay. Oh.
Do you have one?
You can make one.
I guess so. So, no, I don't have any nomination. So, any discussion on the nomination for chair? No discussion. Okay. Well, shall we nominate for vice chair and vote for all together? A slate, as Susan described?
I think just office by office.
Office by office. Okay, so are we ready to vote for the chair?
We are.
All those in favor of Elliot for the chair?
That means you hung.
Any opposed?
That's three. Richard is a no vote.
I'm abstaining. yes.
He's abstaining. Okay. All right. I'll vote for myself.
Were you interested? Richard?
No, I've been there and done that.
Uh-huh. Okay. So the vote is for Elliot and one abstention. So that motion is carried. Next is vice chair. Do we have nominations for vice chair? There is a point I'd like to make, and I consulted with Janice recently about eligibility of alternate members for officer positions. And Janice responded with the opinion that they are not eligible. Does
Works for me.
that make sense for everybody? Huh, okay.
So
All
it
right.
Makes sense for the alternates.
Yeah. Right, okay, so for vice chair, do we have nominations? I have a nomination, Bob Perkins.
I was about ready to say the same thing.
Okay, right. We have a
Would you like
second.
to chat?
What does the vice
Yeah, I
have
think
to
it's
do?
important for the person.
It just means that a vice when the chair is not present at the meeting, you fill in. Okay.
Okay, so vice chair, we have Bob and second by Ron. Any discussion about Bob as vice chair? No discussion. We'll have a vote. All in favor? 5-0. Congratulations, Bob. Okay. So the third officer is secretary. Do we have nominations for secretary?
I nominate Mark Sigenthaler.
That'll teach you that there's a meeting.
You don't have to be here to get executed.
You can watch the meeting on video and take the notes.
Well, my husband said they used to take, the town clerk used to do them through the video or something.
Mhm. Janice, what's your historical
They
perspective?
used to have a clerk staff, but that's no longer true.
Yeah, it was Liz
It was,
that-
yeah,
Right.
that's when Liz was,
It's not true anymore.
No, City of Linda, something like
Since she says she still watches on TV.
that.
Well, nominating someone who's not present.
Does the secretary have to write up the meeting, the minutes? of the
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
That's it.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, and those descriptions are in page 8 of the committee handbook. Secretary responsible for ensuring meeting minutes are recorded, filed with the town manager's office.
I'll second Bob's nomination. If Mark has some resistance to it, we can take that up in this meeting.
I actually think Mark would be,
Yeah, is there anybody who's a
Would be
member,
good,
right?
and
That's the most important.
if
The
he,
minutes
Okay.
only need to reflect the attendance and the actions.
Right, I mean,
It doesn't have to be.
Verbatim of what happened.
It doesn't have to be detailed.
Okay, any discussion about Mark as the secretary?
if he refuses, then we'll revisit it
We'll
at the next
revisit
meeting.
it next month.
Okay. All those in favor of Mark Siegenthaler as secretary? 5-0, motion is carried.
I thought you were texting him that he could come in.
No.
get here to
Yeah.
figure
Yeah,
things.
you hear his car scream.
Yeah, right, don't do that right now. He'll
Well,
come
you should text them congratulations.
bolting in the door. Congratulations.
Um,
So,
One thing for Janice. Has everyone gone through the paperwork with the town clerk? I haven't, I know.
You have to check with the town clerk, I know.
Okay, you don't know who
No.
has or has not. Okay.
They have, they all, everybody gets a letter to go see Katrina. to take care
Yeah, and I saw that and said, oh, yeah, okay, I probably should do that, but I haven't.
of it. She's here today, so you should go on out.
Yeah, thank you.
okay, do we have any non-agenda items? Susan?
I would just like to take a moment to recognize the passing of Dee Conover, an epic figure in our town and significant player in the vibrancy of the harbor and the Curtis Island
Yeah, caretaker,
Lighthouse and,
caretaker for many years.
yeah.
Decades.
Decades.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Anyone have any stories to share about Dee Dee Conover? I'll bet there must be many.
Yeah. Yeah, she was so, when I saw her maybe a week ago, she drove by, she was in the car with her son, Peter, who's been a friend of mine for a long time, and they have a nice chalet up at a Sugarloaf, and they'd always let me come up. You know, like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we'd go up all the time, and she'd always be there. We'd come back, Pete and I would come back, and she'd be there. She'd be skiing, but she'd usually leave the mountain a little earlier, and she'd have lunch ready for us. She was always so friendly, and was great person.
I always admired the fact that she would be swimming off of Curtis Island,
Around Curtis Island,
around Curtis Island,
literally.
at an age that you wouldn't think people would be doing that. In that water.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, thank
She
you
died
for,
suddenly.
Oh, no, I think she was in decline. I know my,
Yeah, she's
my
been,
son's mother-in-law was looking in on her.
Mhm.
They were, she had dementia and was in
Yeah.
decline, but I think she went peacefully with her family.
okay, thank you all for sharing. Next item, approval of meeting minutes, August 13, 2024. That approval will be deferred until the October meeting because those minutes have not been prepared.
Mark's got some more.
Next item on the agenda, Harbor Masters report. And you see, I have a short list of items there that we're hoping that you'll be able
I
to
like that.
comment on.
Yeah, so I mentioned to you the dredging of the inner harbor, which would be I call it the private dredge. This is a non-federal project zone. We do it approximately every 10 years. So I've done it twice already, and it's time to start at least thinking about this next one. So this is just the area under the finger floats, the small boat marina, where the fishermen are. I haven't heard anyone complain yet, but I mean, usually what prompted me the second time was, at a very low tide, people's boats were leaning over on the side like this because they were in the silt and the mud. I'm surprised with the storms being, having greater volume of water, the sediment isn't getting, it's not any faster than it used to be. But it's something that's on my mind, and the one thing I'd like to do is talk about who would we get to start the permitting process, because I think the last time I did it was Gary Neville's wife. But she doesn't do permitting anymore. And if there's a few outcropping of rocks that they wouldn't let me last decade when we went to dredge, that I really wanted to take out, and they're like, "No, you can't do that."
Okay, who said that?
It was DEP. And I think,
Okay.
well, and I got that through, Miss Neville, Elaine. But literally, there's like there's a series of boulders that are half the size of this, quarter the size of this table, that make up that first little peninsula of rocks that comes out. So if you walk down the ramp, or that main ramp to where the fisherman area is, you turn left, there's 20 dinghies right there, but
You can't go anywhere.
at low tide you can't go anywhere because
Take it in.
it's like,
Or-
that prevents you. So, and it'd be great to just get them out.
Do you know the nature of the objection?
I don't. It was kind of like a big boom, no. So it'd be nice to figure out if we could do that, because as a community, it would, again, I don't know if we get rid of that, you do something and,
It would affect where the ducks sit at low tide.
exactly, I don't know. But it really would make it more useful for us if we could do that. And I just don't, maybe I'm missing something, but it doesn't seem like it's gonna like kill any elver population or something if we get rid of them. So.
Okay, Jeremy, can you share a perspective on the permitting process for that action?
I've never, in all my years of doing permitting, never been involved in a dredge permit project. So I can certainly figure it out. My gut says we're doing a maintenance dredge probably, right? And
Yeah.
Army Corps and DEP weren't considering removal of those rocks as part of a maintenance dredge. So that would have probably required a
Just
full
DEP.
permit.
Army Corps stops at the federal.
I think Army Corps is still involved on that one.
Okay, that could be.
Yeah. So I'll look into it a little bit, but that's my gut, is that we were trying to do a maintenance dredge, and a maintenance dredge generally does not include removal of
Yeah.
existing rock or boulders in the harbor. It's not dredging.
I'm hoping there's a little bit of gray area that we can explore. Another one is the drop zone. Where do we put the fill? So the first time they brought it to a drop zone off Rockland, in deep water, but then that's a little more expensive. Whereas 10 years ago, I was trying to find you have to get it sampled to make sure it's not, polluted. Yeah, heavy metals and sort, and then you can bring it up, somewhere in mainland. So we actually did it on Hobson Pond Road. There's Oak Hill Cemetery North, which is right there, and to the right, it was the field sloped down a lot, and we did measurements, and we were like, well, that's about how much fill we have to, and it turned out perfect. It made it so that it's now a usable plot for folks. I don't know if we can find another spot like that, because we definitely save a little money. So those are little things I want to start doing. I don't know if someone maybe have a sub dredge committee that's someone wants to kind of help, like do a few things, like make some phone calls to Lane Neville or whatever, just an idea, because in the next year or 2 years, we're going to want to do that dredge.
I would think Steve would include this as we start working on budgets for the town manager, that you would include something like this in your budget going forward to at least start planning and permitting of a maintenance dredge. I
Yes.
assume.
So every year we put $10,000, $11,000 in. So I think we have like whatever, $70,000 in the fund already.
All right, good.
So,
Yep.
but yeah, we could look at that again to see if that's enough because things have changed. I don't know.
Steve, is there a time of year when that is typically done?
Usually it's right after we take the floats out. So December, and then
Late fall.
yeah, it's right after we take the floats out. I think you're right. Yeah. There's a time when they're allowed to dredge, I guess. So
Okay,
Oh, yeah. Or even up at Sagamore Farm.
so
Another option.
Just so
Jer-
there's a couple of things.
Yep.
Jeremy, how does this project get initiated within the town process?
I'm not sure, but Steve and I will work on it, on the maintenance. I mean, that's what you're talking about, the maintenance dredge. Yeah. We'll figure that out, and I can put something together for your next board, committee meeting if you'd like.
Okay, all right, yeah, that'd be great.
Steve, do you remember the cost 10 years ago?
I think it was like 75,000 to 85,000. We saved a little bit of money because we could put that, but you remember the trucks were bringing it up, the big trucks were bringing it up, and there was people were a little upset because there was mud and stuff getting on Mechanic Street. Some of the sludge because it was wet. But it turned out to be, I think, great because it made sense. And now that area and I guess folks were like, oh, I remember having meetings up at the cemetery, like where are we going to put it? How are you going to? And so we had big machines, moving around, and people were like, oh, is anything going to grow on it? And I'm like, is anything going to grow? Oh,
You can't tell if it was done now.
well, it's all organic materials, all dead leaves. It was really good soil for grass to grow. So grass grew immediately on it. So again, if we can think of some other ideas of where to put this dredge material, it's going to save us some money.
Probably, I imagine, need another permit to dump it off of rock.
Yes and no. You need a permit to obviously dump it on land as well. So it's a different type of permit. But yeah, we could figure that out. And every 10 years, so you kind of I have to rethink it, It did it? The DG drop zone off Rockland? Maybe so. Yep. Maybe so. So yeah. So it's good we start talking about it. Again, it's not a big thing. It's not like folks are the boats are leaning over yet, but it's it's getting shallow there because of the.
We have some extreme low tides coming up here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll be able to look at it and say, oh yeah, you're right, Steve.
Okay, so you and Jeremy are going to coordinate and
Yeah,
see if you can get that going.
we'll take care of some.
Okay, great.
I think it's important to make an observation of where the silt that's there came from. When we dredged that, it caused the fines, the silt that was in the beach, to wash down into the space that we dredged. That beach used to be suitable for grounding boats out to Camden. And it's no longer suitable. It's just all rocks now. Rocks the size of basketballs. They weren't exposed prior to that dredging. So the fines that we're dealing with now came from the beach. And that may be why you're not seeing those fines building up anymore, is because they've all washed out. There's really no fines left. It's gravel and boulders now. So I'm not sure at what point do we stop pushing that dredging toward that beach if we're concerned about displacement of that wall, or what is the plan for fortifying that wall moving forward to prepare for resiliency?
Yeah, Ron brings up a good point. If we're gonna, there is talk about changing things around with that wall and stuff. So we should maybe have a meeting with library or whoever else that's involved in conjunction with planning with this next dredge. Might be worth it.
Just as a little backstory, I've been meeting with FEMA and the library trustees and their little facilities committee. FEMA is funding some repairs. We'll be providing some funding reimbursements for repairs to the wall. We are looking at some mitigation measures where they would fund something beyond doing the vertical wall that they have now. And those are all being looked at currently. And if the harbor committee needs to be involved per the code, then you will be involved.
So this is part of a bigger picture.
I
And then throw in the river project too, and that's a bigger picture too. And the library trustees are very cognizant of a vote that's going to happen next June. So they're trying to plan for all the scenarios possible.
So it does seem like this is not like we were originally talking, that this is the annual thing we do. This has become part of not just that bigger picture, but also the whole waterfall picture, because it's all interactive.
Mhm.
Or maybe it's interactive.
Right. And now's the right time to start talking about it, because then this dredging becomes part of that bigger discussion, and it becomes an overall project.
Okay. Yes, Ron.
My observation is there's two effects that are causing the displacement of that wall at the park. One is there's frost in the topsoil, which is displacing the top row of stones and has been for my lifetime memory. The other effect is that wall is leaning now, which it wasn't. That's a recent effect. I think that's happened within the last 20 years. That wall was built in the 50s. It's not as old as the rest of the structure in the park. The wall from where the hauling ramp is, the boat ramp, over to American Boathouse was occupied by buildings, and once that ran its course, the rest of that wall became contiguous to the structure at both ends. But I think it's the erosion of the beach that's caused that wall to start to lean. I think that's part of the effect. I don't think there's one reason why that wall is coming apart. I think that there's two, at least. There's the effect of frost on the top, and there's the effect of erosion on the bottom.
You're getting also a lot of fines, and I've looked at this with some engineers. You're getting also a lot of the fines on the backside of that wall are being pulled out when you have the storms, these huge storms that we're having, and it's overtopping. And you're getting so much force that beyond that wall, the ocean and the currents are like this, and then they're pulling fines out too. So I think everything's all happening at the same time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Steve. Can we continue with your?
Yeah.
Another simple update.
Yeah. Well, the launch ramp repairs. So I've been talking with Dave St. Laurent, who is his public works is going to be working in conjunction, obviously, with me, and we're going to put that in. So we're basically thinking that that's going to happen once we stage all of our material. American Concrete says they'll have those concrete slabs by mid-November. So if we get that and all of our stuff that we need, all of our material staged there, I've talked with Dave a couple times about this. Would it make sense to do that before the winter, and then expose it obviously to one more winter of storms, or wait till March and then hit it then, or whatever, February, and hit and redo the whole thing then? I've got 3 different quotes coming back for the rebuilding of the new floats, which we have funding for. that's already, the budget committee already approved the fact that we're building new floats, and we got a quote from Proc what that would cost. So we have that money. So
Who
It-
else do we have quotes from?
we have a quote from Custom Floats, but they don't build those floats like that. So I have a meeting with Henry Renault, who is one of the people from, he's a local person from the Portland facility. And it wouldn't be exactly the way we had them built. And not sure if I'm not an expert with those. I don't think it would be as strong, but he was basically like, we can build them like this. I don't know if I want to go with that. It was cheaper. It was a little cheaper, and I don't have the exact quotes. It was definitely a little bit less expensive. So I'll come back with you with what we decide on for that. I've got Toby Winkelhofer looking at the blueprints, and he is going to get back to me with a quote as well. So either, and I really don't care, but it'd be nice if we could do it local. So either Lake City, which is Toby Winkelhofer's company, is going to rebuild them, or Two Harbor Marine. They haven't come back with an actual quote yet. They've kind of verbally said what they thought it would be, and it was very close to what it was, a little less than Proc actually. But so yeah, we'll decide that. I would imagine we're going to rebuild that's the actual concrete with the new bigger slabs. I would think it's up to Dave because he's the one doing it. But I would vote that we do it. March.
How much bigger are the slabs again?
Okay, so the current ones are 6 inches deep by 17 inches wide by 10 inches long, and the new ones are going to be 8 inches thick by 10. What did I say?
Inches.
I'm sorry, yeah, 10 feet long. They're going to replace them with ones that are 8 inches deep by 5 feet wide by 15 feet long. So they're going to be quite substantially bigger. Connected, and we're not sure how, but we like to somehow. So now you'll have one line right in the middle, right? Instead of having 10, 10, and 10, and being 30 feet wide, it's gonna be 15 and 15. So instead of having two seams, you'll have one seam, and we figure out how we can lock them down as well with either.
How wide are
They're 5 feet,
they?
5 feet wide, so they're much bigger slabs. The little ridges?
What I'm saying.
Yeah, the little grooves. No, they're going to be grooved, but not as big. So,
Can anyone see any issues with letting the ramp set as is until next spring? Ron?
If this solution is suitable for that exposed place, I mean, this is an experiment, just like the first one was. The first ramp design hasn't worked very well because we are now in the habit of constantly repairing it. So we've accepted the fact that it doesn't work, and so therefore we fix it every year. And that's been ongoing. I think that there was work being done on that within 5 years of when it was originally constructed. Those slabs were getting displaced by the wave action of the exposure. So if these deeper, wider, longer slabs do turn out to be the ultimate solution to the problem, then it won't matter whether they're exposed one more winter or not.
One question I would have about when they get beaten up. So I assume that they've gotten more and more susceptible over time, and that so we leave them there and they get kicked around. Is that going to make it harder to install the new system, or do you kind of have to take all that out, put crushed rock or something under there, level it? So
yeah,
the installation's the same regardless.
the installation's the same. We're taking everything out. The aggregate underneath it and putting all new bigger rock aggregate in. We've talked to different people that have actually done this, and they gave us some little hints on bury 6x6 PT in the aggregate about an 1/8 inch higher than the aggregate. So when you then take your machines and drop these slabs, you can easily slide them on the 6x6s, and they're not trying to mush this aggregate. You know, he's sliding down, you lock him in place, you bolt him, boom. They said it's pretty easy to do. But yeah, we'd have to take everything out anyway. But Ron brings up a good point. It's kind of up to it. One more winter is not going to make a difference.
They're good, they're good.
Yeah, but we're never gonna, even if they're good, we're dealing with Mother Nature, so, you know.
True. We don't want to.
It's true, you're using up one extra winter.
Yeah.
Is it
You know,
going okay over there now?
it is. We've been lucky. I've been lucky. I was a little nervous about the fact that we were going to ask one more season out of this, but we haven't had a southeaster this summer at all yet.
Much use.
Yeah, it's been okay. I would tell folks go slow. It's not perfect, but it's a little bumpy. You guys have seen it. You know, it looks a little. It's pretty good. I mean, knock on wood. But we got a kicker southeaster, and it's not going to last.
So how much does the ramp use from November 15 to April 1st?
A little bit. You got urchin guys that come in. They urchin and they'll drop their boats in.
And are there alternatives for them? You know, if we had a storm and get kicked up again, we certainly don't want to spend a lot of money fixing something so we can replace it.
Yeah, right. He's right. Basically, Rock.
What's the better time for the town to do it?
You're right. So,
Well, that's a good question, Liz. And Dave hasn't really said, I want to do it here. I want to do it there. I mean, Dave St. Laurent would sometimes will get upset because he's like, I don't have time to do that. But he hasn't said anything like we have to do it here or have to do it there. So
You have an estimate for lead time on the job, or I mean the duration of the job?
I know I've never built one, so I don't know how long it's going to take.
Is there a budgetary number for this project? Just the slabs, not the floats?
Yeah, I think that was 80,000, maybe 85,000. We almost got that from already
From FEMA,
from FEMA. It gave us 74,000?
74, I think.
74,000 to fix that what it was. So that was put it back the way it was. But then we had another talk with FEMA saying, well, we don't want to put it back the way it was. We want to make it stronger. So, and what's the name for that?
Hazard mitigation.
Yeah. So they'll help a township. You love that. They'll help a municipality take something and not put it back the way it was, but actually make it stronger. And they'll actually give you money to make it stronger because they know that means they're not going to have to give money again the next big storm because you've made it more resilient.
What's the anchoring system for the new system?
Much like the old one, it's just you're relying on the fact that they're so much heavier. We have talked about putting like maybe 1 or 2 helix in down on that line, to actually anchor it too. But we haven't actually. I mean, Dave was the one that said, let's do this. And so I'm like, great. I'm kind of leaving it in his ballpark to be the guy for that. He hired an engineer wrote it up.
Is that 85K for the materials only?
Yes.
And so the labor installation is on top of that. And some of that will be by the town and some of that will be private?
No, it's right now almost all by the town. Dave was willing to take that on.
To Harbor not involved?
Mm-mm.
Where will all that material be stored if you don't do it until will it all be stacked in that parking space? That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we're going to probably most of it's going to be in that turning basin. Yeah, because
That's where the floats go.
well, the floats are going to leave because they're either we don't know. I'm not sure. The town has to decide what they want to do with the floats. I wanted to put them near Library Park and make a new system off the Library Park system for kayaks and small boats. But now Curtis Island says they want them. So I hadn't heard of it. Look at that on cue, Mike Scaling heading up Curtis Island. So, but we'll figure that out. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bigger question, and Mike's obviously here to chat about Curtis Island, but we just got to figure out access to Curtis Island at some point. It's going to be a bigger discussion that the town needs to have, especially in light of the work that the foundation's doing and the town's doing to try to figure out how we can restore the lighthouse and the keeper's house out there.
And could availability of the ramp affect that work?
It's not the ramp. No, it's really about contractors and sorry, Mike, we just started down something here. It's really about getting access of materials and contractors to Curtis Island to actually do work on the buildings.
But
Not an easy thing to do.
Might they not need the ramp for?
Yeah,
For
I mean,
those
that's not going
purposes?
to happen this fall
Mhm.
or in the spring.
Yeah. Okay.
But at some point, you got to get contractors and people over to Curtis Island. They got to get materials up, and how do you get them access to the island? And then how do you get from the island up? That's a bigger question. There's a lot there. So certainly those floats could be used to help facilitate work at Curtis Island. And that was the intent, but I don't think there's any desire right now to commit to anything without having some sort of access plan for people to access Curtis Island, because if we put floats out there for the construction or work that needs to happen on the buildings, how do you manage people, just wanting to hang out on the island and tie up their boats there and access with a ramp to the island? It can get overcome by people very quickly. And I think that's a pretty fragile space and property. So there's a lot of, I think, discussions that have to happen in town about how that plays out.
Okay. Yes.
Just
Stephen.
one minor thing while we got Steve here. Hey, Steve? I'd really like to see it if we could put a speed limit sign out at the entrance to the harbor by Curtis Island. Several boats moored out there, and we get rocked like crazy by, some of these people coming into town with their triple outboards and all kinds of boats that,
Yeah.
they feel that when they get sort of halfway past the moorings, it's okay to open up and, other people are hankering out there.
Yeah.
That would just be nice.
So where would you propose that would go? Because obviously we've got the
Well, we have
15 5 mile per hour. But once the actual outer harbor, federal navigable waterway starts.
in the outer harbor,
So near Green Can number 7 and between Green Can number 7 and
outboard of Green Can, sort of where our moorings in.
yeah.
Why not have a speed limit in the mooring?
Yeah.
Wake zone and then that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one.
Which are lobster tour boats.
No, I mean, I know what you're saying. No, I know what you're saying. Comes a point where my team has to tell folks, be careful, because other people start yelling back. I'm not speeding up, whatever. In a federal navigable waterway, it's headway speed only, but most people don't even know what that means. When you're outside of that, you're responsible for your wake. So in where you're talking about, you're allowed to go past 5 miles per hour, but you are responsible for your wake. If you hurt somebody with your wake, so we have to talk about that and figure out. But yeah.
Okay. Yes, Ron.
I think we're off topic.
Yes, we are.
I think we
Yes.
propose a little continuity to the.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'd like Steve to continue.
Would you like to meet Mr. Chairperson to talk about harbor storm preparation? Because that's next.
I'd like to explain that item, at least what
Sure.
my thinking was. Of course, we've all seen what's happened out in the harbor from the big storms that we've had, and the piers and such. And also, what I was specifically thinking about is loose boats. And I believe we've had loose boats resulting from storms. And I wonder if we should require that all boats be pulled.
You mean like before a projected like category
I mean,
5
by
hurricane or
a
something? or-
certain point in the season.
Oh.
Is that, I mean, can that even be done?
I mean, I think we don't want to fix something that isn't broke. I mean, during the winter, usually the folks that are going to be on mooring usually know what they're doing. So they'll have, they've taken preparations to make sure that their boats don't go free. I mean, I've never even heard of a boat in the winter having an issue off season. During the season is usually when there's so many boats that there's someone who hasn't taken care of their pennant, hasn't looked at it. Storms come and they don't have a safety pennant on, and etc.
I think
Okay.
we already have some of what you're talking about because we have mooring inspections. So that you don't have,
Mhm.
I mean, I am someone who, out of North Haven, never had the thing inspected. And the first time it blew like 8 knots, my boat was luckily in a bed of seaweed on the rocks, uninjured, having gone through about 6, 7 boats without hitting them. Pure blind luck. But it emphasized the need to inspect, and we already have that. So then we're really going to tell people that they can't risk their boat out there because it might go on the shore. And if it hits another boat that's out there, they have also assumed that risk.
No, but we can move this towards something that does make sense. I do have a hurricane preparation kind of like piece of literature that I could update. Because there was like a series 12 years ago where we had some serious hurricanes coming up this way. So we had, I have volunteers and a tree of like, who's going to take care of this? Galvin was going to be managing the steamboat landing because we saw like 50 people trying to get their boats out. And so, okay, don't back up yet. And, help get this boat onto this trailer, stuff like that. And I have a thing saying if it's a Cat 3, if it's a Cat 5, then you do have to get your boat out. And comes a point where the storm's pretty bad, and so everyone wants to come in. Hey, Steve, can I use the back dock? Can I bring my 40-footer in? I don't want to be in the outer harbor for this. And usually it's like, okay, great, and then that gets packed in there, but then there's a point where I need to say no one can come in. Like there's no boats at the town docks. In fact, we might take the town docks out of the water. Like there comes a point where the town has to take care of its own infrastructure and look for itself before it starts. So yeah, it's not totally unmerited what you're saying. There is a point where I would say we recommend you get your boat out of the water, in 2 days or 1 day. We've now we're in the cone of a Cat 5 hurricane. So, get your boat out of the water. There's no safe really place for it in the water.
But the in-between could be like all the boats that are in the water, make sure that they're
Exactly.
inspections.
Exactly. This, it's going to blow this much. And everyone's like, do you think it's going to blow this hard? And everyone's talking about and so well, maybe you should leave and go find Cradle Cove or Kent Cove, wherever you're going to go hole up, because you don't want to be in Camden for that. Or you can be in Camden, but make sure you do this, put a safety line on, etc.
Okay. Any other discussion about storm preparation? Then that takes us to the mercantile.
The schooner mercantile. We have Andrew here. Andrew, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Eggy. I came aboard Mercantile this summer. I was going to be first mate on the trip to Michigan with Bob Schaefer and Captain Sean Griffith. Obviously didn't happen, so the boat was hanging out in Booth Bay for a little while before I was the one that took her up and graced you all with her presence. There in the outer harbor where she's been at anchor for the most part for the last month or so. I'm sort of Bob's deputy in terms of taking care of the boat. I'm doing everything that I can, but I'm eager to meet with you all and answer any questions you might have. And just to give you a status of the update of the status of the boat, right now, Bob is looking at selling the boat to a new owner, hopefully in the coming weeks. Whether that will be someone local or if it will be interested parties from Boston, I know, is one place it may land. That's all I have to say, really.
So, yeah, so a lot of folks have come to me and said, "What's the deal with the Mercantile?" And I realized that a lot of local people, you know, are coming. It's coming to fruition that they didn't even know it was leaving, but now they're like, "Well, we'd like to. Is there any way it could stay here?" So that's a possibility. There's a couple of people that are saying they might want to somehow work something out with Bob, keep it, put it back at its berth at the head of the harbor, and try to do something with it. Whether it's for the first 3 years to get some, because it needs work. The boat needs new masts. It doesn't have its certificate anymore.
It does have a COI.
It does? Okay.
And if that's the case, and that's something that you think there's a groundswell of support, I've been considering putting a bid on the boat. I have a prospectus here.
Nice,
for the
nice.
First couple of
Okay.
years.
So that's an option. So we need to figure out, I guess the town would need to figure out, would they want to, and I think they would. I think the town would say, okay, go ahead, put it back at the head of the harbor. It's a national landmark. It's been there since, I don't know when, so, but it can't stay where it is at anchor. And I told Bob that 2 days ago. It's dangerous. It slipped anchor once. We went and got it, brought it back. So.
You mean the anchor just dragged or something broke?
No, the anchor fouled on itself. So the anchor, because it spins around, and its anchor got caught up on one of its flukes, and then it was dragging by the wrong way. So.
When's the last time the Mercantile was functional, like commercially functional?
Well, last season, not this summer, but last summer, it took folks out. And
23.
The only reason that it can't take people out today is because it hasn't had her masts pulled since the Grace Bailey. Which that was the Coast Guard said every boat has to have its masts inspected after that happened. And Mercantile, obviously being a sister ship of the Grace Bailey for so long, it's a priority. So the Coast Guard has said this boat is not operating commercially until this has happened, and that can't happen until it's dockside, and then it can't be dockside until it's insured. So it's this whole cascade of priorities that I've been working through, and I've been in touch with the people. But until recently, there hasn't been a very concrete plan as to the transfer of ownership. And, I'm not from the area. I'm not super well connected. Obviously, I've had the pleasure of being in contact with Steve, which has been a real blessing, having him help us with the harbor situation. But, yeah, I can't do this by myself.
for those of you who haven't met Bob Schaefer, he's a wonderful gentleman. He's affable. He's kind. He admits he doesn't know what he's doing. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just really wanted to buy the boat. I fell in love with it. And so we're in a unique situation where the town could maybe, if the town, I don't know what the pulse is. I don't know if the town's like, we don't want to hear anymore, or, do we love windjammers? We want to keep it here. And if so, would they let the vessel stay at its berth, not run as a windjammer, at least for the first 3 years until they could make some money, but, museum or high-end concierge or something, get some, well, exactly, figure out. So that's something that needs to get talked about, and soon, because the boat.
Is it possible to authorize it to be on a temporary real mooring at its present location?
Yes, and I've talked to Two Harbor Marine and said, could you put a 7-ton block in? And they said possibly we're busy right now, but I could contact them again today and be like, where it is, put a big mooring in so it's not on its anchor. But even that, it's not going to last. You can't be out there, past November with the storms coming. And
Seems like, well, what isn't being talked about, a conversation I had this morning with Bob and Alden Cole, who's a little involved in this, is there seems to be a desire to bring the boat into the dock.
Mm-hmm.
That it needs pumping. You're pumping a lot every day, right? That right now it's not watertight besides the anchoring issue, and it needs shore power, right? In order to have an electric bilge pump working. So that's an immediate concern.
Exactly.
And if it does come into the dock, do we charge them? How much do we charge them?
Yep.
et cetera.
I would say, well, here's what I think. Mr. Chairperson, you correct me if it'd be great if you guys could literally make a motion. I mean, I'm not sure if that works. It's not on the agenda, but it's would be part of the harbor master's, I don't know what you would want to call it. This is my report, but if you could, I've already told verbally the town manager, I think we should bring it back to its birth. Because it's unsafe where it is, and because of this unique situation. That means Ray, and I could take care of him. He asked if he could take the Swift and move it from. Remember, he asked through a letter to the select board and the town manager, can he swap? This was last year. Can he swap the Mistress with the Swift? Yeah, fine. It's comparable. It's a little bigger. It looks nice there. So he got rid of the Mistress, and now the Swift was there. Then when the Merc left, he said to me, well, it's kind of hard for me to get that in there. Can I move the Swift over to where the Merc was? It's easier to go in and out. And I said, sure. So now I'm going to need to say to Ray, and I've intoned to him, this might happen. You got to put the Swift back where it was originally, to where the Mistress was, because the Merc's got to go back here. He didn't say anything when I said that, but that's the only kind of snafu where we might get some friction, But then we can bring the Merc back in, and then the town can decide what it wants to do, because that's the issue. So that's basically the issue.
I think there's a benefit to having the boat at the head of the harbor not going out, because I always thought, I wish those windjammers weren't going out for most of the week, because actually it's prettiest on the week, Saturday night when they're up there.
Mm-hmm.
But then I get a little concerned when you hear about the condition of this boat, that it'll become like Wiscasset in 1970, and you have a dumpy boat that's too unseaworthy to get out of there. So if it was really a museum or something and going to be there all the time, I think it's actually a benefit.
Well, the condition of the mast and locating it in the inner harbor it can present a hazard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have to get pulled alongside somewhere, probably at Lyman Morse, where they can pull a crane alongside. Take
them out.
Well, again, the mast, if it's not sailing and you don't have any pressure on them, they're not going to fall down. So the thing is that if the town is willing to say, we want it back, we want it there, you got to make sure you sell it to the right person or people that can say, okay, here's our basic plan with it. And I believe someone is about to hand in a letter to the town and say exactly that. It'd be great if this committee could say, well, we took a vote and we recommend that the town does do that. We think it would behoove the town to have that boat.
I think we should react to a plan, not stamp a plan that
What about the storms?
there are concerns.
Storms in the past, are those a concern?
Who knows? I don't know.
Who owns liability for the mercantile now?
It's strictly Bob Schaefer. There's no insurance.
There's no insurance.
So the first thing, go
Is
ahead.
it Bob Shaver individually or as head of the group that he was trying to put?
The boat is owned.
Corporation or?
It's owned by a nonprofit, registered to a nonprofit, but Bob is the beginning and the end of that nonprofit.
He's the sole person of the profit. Yeah.
Yeah.
LLC.
In other words, there's no backup. If the boat becomes a liability to the town, at this point, there's no backup.
The boat is a liability to the town right now where it is, for sure.
And this Friday, it looks bad. The wind is supposed to puff up like it did the last time the anchor picked up. Friday, it's supposed to get back up. Not quite as bad. It was blowing like 40 that day, but it's supposed to, gust to 30 on Friday on the northeast.
Yeah. So in the least, we need to get a party of 6 on board and bring the anchor back up while the yellow boat's keeping the boat in place. Make sure that the anchor isn't fouled. If it is, unfoul it like we did last time and reset it. That's the least has to happen. I'd like to make it so the boat comes back to its berth or leaves. It shouldn't be out there.
How did it get here?
I think we all know that.
I took it here.
Towed or?
Yeah, well, it's got its own power.
Yeah, there was the yawl boat and the sails. We were doing both.
You actually had sails up.
The main sail.
With helmets on.
The foresail, the foreboom snapped in half when it was not in use. So it was just sheeted down. And as soon as we got out of Booth Bay Harbor, it was flogging back and forth. And it was in two pieces on the deck.
Wow.
That's not
Yes.
auspicious.
My concern, I would love to see it back at the harbor. My concern would be if the masts are not okay to go sailing, then I'd be concerned of them being in the harbor during a storm, not necessarily 30, but what we might be getting, in the coming months or winter. Obviously, the community's a little nervous after the Grace Bailey. I don't know. But then you take the mast out and then you just have a demasted windshield. I don't know. It's
Now
kinda
you're
loses
Wisconsin.
You lose it. I don't know, but for me, erring on the side of caution, that makes me a little nervous, although I'd love to see it back at the harbor, sitting down.
And I almost,
looking at them.
and I almost just said, well, there's no sign of rot because there isn't, but there wasn't any sign of rot on the Bailey either.
Great.
But once the masts are taken out, they're inspected and then re-stepped, right? I mean, it wouldn't be,
Yeah.
the intention would not be to
Oh,
have the
okay,
boat there
okay.
without the mast. It would just be for inspection and maintenance
I
that
didn't
would be
catch that
needed.
part.
I mean, is that, I'm asking.
Mm.
I'm asking
If
about the
if
project.
that were a condition, I imagine it would cost a few $1,000s just to have it inspected.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, I find this highly provocative that we're actually spending this much time because obviously we care about the mercantile and we care about the fact that it's be good for the town if it was still here. Because if we didn't, we would just be like, just get it out of here. But it's a downeaster. It's a downeaster. It was built in Agamagan Reach in 1916. I think it's got strong ties, to this area. It does, and so that's why I've almost been like, it was my first command. I drove that boat for 7 years, so I mean that's why I've kind of took a step back because I don't want my love for that boat to then make it so I'm not acting in the town's best interest. But the fact that you guys are talking about it and gals, it's good.
But I think that an entry level is the mass inspection. Because bringing the boat up there with the idea that you could have a storm
Yeah.
at some point in the next 6 months
Well,
and crash.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you for putting me back on track. I mean, why are we having this conversation right now? Do you want to actually put something forward like we do want it back, but before it does, it's got to have its mast inspected before we put it back there? I mean, what's going on here?
I think we need a proposal, but anyone who's making a proposal should understand that without step one being the mass inspection, because I think when the boom breaks, it makes me think there's a whole lot of stuff that
Sure.
go wrong.
Sure.
And I don't care if the boat sails. I just don't want it falling down on someone.
Yes, Rob. We need to boil it down to what we do know. We can't make assumptions about the mass. It's reasonable to assume that because they were installed the same time that the Grace Bailey's masts were installed, that there could well be as bad, but they may not be. But either way, we can't expose the town to the liability of, there's more important than the mast issue from me is the fact that she's leaking and would sink if nobody were tending her. So if that's a requirement that she get plugged in somewhere so that we have an automated bilge pump, so she doesn't sink in our harbor, either the inner harbor or the outer harbor. As long as she's in the outer harbor, she should have an anchor watch. There should be somebody on board monitoring the bilge, unless there's some kind of a newfangled apparatus that would set an alarm that would cause your cell phone to advise you that the bilge level is high, and then you could instantly go out there and lower it. But we can't, as a body, I don't think that we can recommend really one way or the other. My advice to you is that without a certificate of inspection, the boat has no income capability. Her value diminishes exponentially. So keeping that certificate of inspection current is job number one as owner of the vessel. I've seen it happen. When the certificate of inspection expires, its income capability is gone.
Yeah.
Falls flat.
Go ahead. I was on the dock this morning with Alden Cole doing like electrical on the yawl boat. We had a battery go down, and then he got on the phone with, I guess this is Mr. Gold, and he was like, "Oh, there's a harbor meeting happening today." So I just ran back and put some clean clothes on and came here.
That was obviously unnecessary.
Yeah, well,
Now.
I told him.
yeah, I go out there. I go out there every morning.
But you're not living on the boat?
No.
What we're seeing here as a body and what we're hearing from you is a lack of continuity in responsibility. You're saying you're taking responsibility for the boat. That's as an employee. Ultimately, it falls on the nonprofit. And then maybe there's a way to get a hold of the guy that actually owns it. Maybe there isn't. And then maybe we end up with the responsibility of taking care of a boat that didn't have a plan. So if the masts were taken out, I mean, if you could at least commit to taking the masts out, and it would be in your best interest to do that, so as to keep your certificate of inspection current. If the Coast Guard refuses to let you carry passengers until you take the masts out and have them inspected, then that's the first thing you need to do. But there's no guarantee that when the masts do come out, that they are either repairable or replaceable. There's access to pieces of Douglas fir that size just doesn't exist anymore. Pigeon Spar Company in Boston closed 50 years ago. So the challenge is splicing out the ends of the masts that are in existence. And several of the schooners have had to do that this past winter, this spring, early spring. The Heritage and the American Eagle both, I think the American Eagle spliced both masts, and the Heritage did a huge splice on the top of the mainmast. That's a known aspect of what you walked into when you purchased the boat. And so it's not fair to ask the town to take responsibility for that risk.
Yeah, well, to be clear, I'm not asking the town. I didn't come here with the intention of asking the town for anything. If I were to buy the boat, I would assume responsibility for maintaining the COI and ensuring the safety of everyone. The mast removal, the 835 that's been placed on the masts and the COI are separate documents. So it's possible to maintain a COI with the existing masts in their condition. The 835 just says this boat, even with an updated COI, cannot operate with these masts until they've been inspected.
The outcome is the same. You can't operate the boat, so you have no source of income.
Correct. But so what I was saying earlier was if I had known that I was going to be sitting here in front of you all, I would have printed 12 of these so that you could have read what I've written up. And this is like a first draft, but the plan would be to, as Steve has said, renovate it as a dockside attraction while the boat is being maintained and the paperwork is being filled out with the Coast Guard to ensure that the COI is maintained, so that 2 years, 3 years down the line, it might operate again as a windjammer. And the masts, I don't think the masts coming down without sails attached to them is much of a concern, because the forces that are put on the masts when there's a sail attached to them are much, much greater than any force that the wind alone would cause on a circular spar, So I understand that's a concern, and if the town were to say that this is a prerequisite to coming to the town dock, that would certainly bump up my first year price tag that I was anticipating. with my potential purchase of the boat. But I don't know how frequently this body meets, but if there is another meeting where I could circulate something like this, or, we could have an opportunity to explore the possibility of a collaboration between the town and whomever might own the boat. I think it is a piece of heritage. It's a piece of the local history here, and it is the last Maine windjammer that still operates in Maine waters. So,
Susan.
I'm the chair of the select board, and I'm going to check with Jeremy and with Steve, but it seems to me like, given that it's the middle of September, we're not talking about this in May. So there's some urgency around where this boat is going to live for the winter. And if it rises to a level where there needs to be a decision made, I think that something has to come before the select board, because this group doesn't meet again unless you plan a second meeting in between before your next scheduled meeting to hash this out more. But it sounds like there's an urgency to this that, we don't want to get into a mess with a storm season coming and winter, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd just like to get take the temperature from Steve and from Jeremy about how we might best, should we put it on the select board agenda to discuss this?
If we did that, it would have to be some kind of executive meeting, because again, we don't have time. And this is an advisory committee. So if you,
Well, our next meeting was supposed to have been this evening, but we've put it off until next week because we're doing a combined meeting with Rockport regarding the sewer. And then we're doing a somewhat shorter agenda because of that, because we have like a 2-hour workshop beforehand with Rockport. So our next meeting would be October 1st, I believe.
no.
I was going to suggest that any of these plans should start with staff, to then go to the select board to say, we'd like the harbor committee's opinion on some proposal or multiple proposals. We don't have authority to do anything.
No.
And you're wanting to put on a windjammer berth? Is that where you're looking to put it?
Well, it makes the most sense that for right now, you put it back to where it was since 1942 or whatever. It's been right there at the end of the harbor. The moorings are in place. The chains are in place. You could bring it in and tie it right where it's always been and plug it in and so it's, and not like that's where it's going to stay, but that's where we should put it until, because if you guys are nervous, like, oh, what if we put it there and then it never leaves? I mean, I don't think we should be thinking about that. I think we should be thinking about, would we want it there? Would you be okay to say, okay, if someone who knows what they're doing buys it and it's safe, we want it back there instead of being away, because it's.
I think that the never leave is a bigger issue than you're saying, in that it's owned by a nonprofit. Sorry, but there's nothing behind a nonprofit other than the boat. So when it becomes useless enough, now you've got something in place, and who has the money to tow it somewhere, and who's going to take it? So it can, if a boat gets bad enough, it can end up stuck somewhere and becoming the albatross of wherever that is. So I think that I would worry right now. I know nothing about the condition of this boat, but I would worry right now that there is a possibility that, just like, we're talking about this thing sitting in the outer harbor on an anchor with no apparent destination. So we already have an issue.
I think.
Since, it was mentioned that this should be looked at in terms of a proposal, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
That at least one thing that should be in that proposal is finances. Are we charging them to sit on the dock? Are we giving them power and water, et cetera?
After listening to all of the discussion today, it's my opinion that the responsibility lies with the owner to define a plan
Mm.
or proposal for disposition of the mercantile. And not lie, the responsibility is not lie with Camden to come up with accommodations for it.
Mhm.
What is the near-term plan for this boat, and as well as can be defined, what is the long-term plan? Now, Andrew, you came to us today. Do you think that you have done that? I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but do you think that you have presented us with a near-term proposal for?
Well, I
what's
can
gonna
read
happen?
exactly what I've written here if you'd like. I don't think I have done that thus far. I could present a number of options to you, if you'd like.
And do you speak for the owner?
I'm not direct, no.
You said you were acting as his deputy.
I'm on the boat, keeping the boat on the right side of the water.
I think it's up to the owner to tell Camden what his plan is for
He's
this
not
boat.
doing it, and now the boat's a hazard out there.
Well,
Bob should have interfaced with you all. Yeah, Bob made a lot of mistakes in this
well,
process.
the town, it's not just the harbor committee, but it's the town that, he's brought this boat back to us, and there's a lot of issues around that, but what's gonna happen? What's his plan for the boat? Why'd he bring it here?
I think he needs to make that plan to staff that then goes to the select board. And if the select board says, this is something that's of great interest, and we like to know what the harbor committee thinks on all this, we should just schedule a meeting focused on that. But if we should move this meeting along, because we're not.
I agree.
Yes.
We can't,
Yes.
we
No, I
can't
agree.
do anything.
Can I just say, Bob is trying to sell the boat with some urgency. So it might not make a lot of sense to go knock down his door and say, you need to go and talk to Camden and talk to so-and-so and give him more on his plate. Maybe that would stimulate him to sell the boat with even greater urgency, which would be definitely good for me. But yeah, I have a plan here to take the boat from Bob. And that plan, I would feel a lot better about that plan if the town of Camden were to be, if I could have communication with this entity and whichever other entities would be concerned. Obviously, I want the boat to remain in good standing with the community. I don't want to do like Bob has and just, set it up somewhere and leave it to rot. My plan includes working through the winter on the boat and taking it to a place where it can work in a commercial capacity next year. In whatever capacity the town of Camden decides is acceptable, whether that is as a museum or as a cocktail bar. It'll be something that is presentable to the community and is not, as the gentleman here said, a nuisance. I think the big difference between the boats that were sitting in Wiscasset or boats that are derelict elsewhere is that those boats lose their certificate of inspection. So those boats have lost all hope of ever carrying passengers in a windjamming capacity ever again. Mercantile has an active COI that expires next year. And I, given the opportunity, will do everything I can to preserve that document. And at the end of the day, that's the important thing, is that the boat is moving in the right direction. And I'm saying that I am here today. I'm very grateful that I was able to be here today, honestly, because I can't imagine how this conversation would have gone with just, conjecture.
Well, it's my impression that your document represents your interests.
Of course.
And the boat belongs to somebody now. And that's who I think we need to hear from.
So the select board's the only entity that can authorize the mercantile to end up at the windjammer.
Correct. That's in my
That's how I
that's the
read
way
it.
the ordinance reads.
So, and then, they can do up to a 3-year agreement, right?
Exactly.
And it's a whole, we'd have to approve the agreement. it's a written agreement not to exceed X number of time, and there's a whole host of things that can be in that agreement. So I think those are the things that get flushed out with staff prior to getting to the select board, and then likely the select board, like Bob and Susan are saying, it would go to them and then come back likely to the harbor committee for some sort of recommendation. I mean, things happen all the time where someone may not have full interest in a property yet or full ownership, but they've got a purchase and sales agreement or they have something in place. So I would think if, I don't remember your name, Andrew?
Andrew.
Has a purchase and sales in place, that likely he could go to the select board and have, right title and interest to ask for certain things of the select board and the harbor committee. And then once there's a plan, then that sale could probably go through, would be my guess. And then it makes it easier for you to make the sale work because you've got a plan going forward for the next year or 2 or 3. But I think those are the things that can get flushed out with staff and the select board and the harbor committee. But I think it's possible to work something, even though he's not the owner, but if there's intent to sell, that Bob has an intent to sell and there's some sort of agreement in place, I think that can work along slowly. But with every, we're going to dot all our I's and cross the T's and make sure the town's protected. That's how I kind of see it.
Okay, we've had a lot of discussion about it.
Just one
Go
more
ahead.
quick question. You mentioned you wanted to take the boat someplace where she could be used commercially. So is it your intent that you were able to get permission from the Coast Guard to operate commercially again, that you would operate out of Camden?
I would hope to stay in Camden, yes.
When does
Okay.
the COI actually expire?
Next year.
But literally December 31st of this year or sometime in next
No,
year?
no, it's, I think, July of next year. And
Around an 18
it's the
month
sort of
cycle.
thing where you can file paperwork, it's all bureaucratic with the Coast Guard. So if you present a plan to them,
Okay.
they'd be amicable to
I have it, but I'm
your
just-
repair schedule.
It isn't a yearly certificate, it's 18 months. Typically, your hull inspection takes place in the spring because that's when you haul the boat to have it painted. So you're usually 6 months ahead on your hull inspection. Your deck inspection isn't due except for every 18 months.
And she's due for fasteners in 25 as well. So we would do it all at the same time.
Yes, I would like to very much.
And that way we would pull her out in the spring so that we have plenty of time to, if there is anything that is of urgency, we would have time to get that started and maintain the COI.
Okay, I'd like to conclude the discussion about the mercantile for the time being so that we can move on to other business. Andrew, I appreciate you coming and sharing with us today. I have a much broader perspective on the mercantile. And how do you spell your last name?
It's Eggy, E-G-G-E, forwards and backwards.
Yes, I got it, right. Okay, well, again, thank you. Next on, Harbor Master Pixley, I presented these issues here, asking for your discussion. Do you have anything else relating to the harbor to share with us today?
No, not just, except the fact that September has been, I would say, unusually busy as far as vessels, visiting vessels.
Visiting vessels,
Yeah,
transients.
vessels that are both at Lyman Morse and vessels that are at the town overnight dock system, inner harbor floats, visiting yacht club. Just seems like it's a healthy September.
Good, good. Okay, I'd like to move on now from the harbor master. And next on the agenda is an item that reads Harbor Committee Work Plan, Issues and Initiatives. And I have prepared my own list of issues, and I'm sure that the rest of you do also. One of my issues is Curtis Island and what's going on Curtis Island. And we had discussed it last month, inviting a representative from the Curtis Island Foundation to join us and share what's going on. And here he is. Your name is Michael?
Yeah, Michael Scaling.
Michael Scaling. My name's Elliot Thompson. Michael, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
So I'm interested to hear. I don't know a lot about what's going on.
Okay. So,
Is it all right if I stay? Is the meeting?
Yeah.
Probably Jim. Here you go.
okay. So my name is Michael Scaling. I'm really glad to be here. And Stephen asked me a while ago if I could come to this meeting and share what's going on and why it's going on and where we are. So this is a great time for us in terms of what's been going on. Excuse me. So my plan is just to give you kind of an overview of the foundation, what's driving us, where we want to go, and just know that there are a whole lot of questions that haven't been answered and that we'll work to get them answered, with the town over the coming months and time. So what we're focused on is restoring the buildings on the island historically and restoring them in a way that they're good for the next 100 years. That's kind of a vision. That's where we want to go. Why I got involved, and this is particularly sad day, was Dee Dee Conover. We started working with Dee Dee several years ago when she came to the Historic Resources Committee and said, gee, a window blew out over her bed last night, and she's probably going to come to the town and ask for some help. And this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And I said, oh, I can help. And so that started kind of our relation. But as you probably all know, Dee Dee passed away yesterday, and after quite a long illness, but she died peacefully and with her family. So it is a sad day, but Dee Dee was my energy to kind of get involved and see what a beautiful asset we have here. So the foundation, jumping ahead a little bit, we formed the foundation because we saw there was a lot of work that needed to be done and done faster than we anticipated the town, as the owner of that island, was able to move forward. We figured the town needed help, and that's based on our experience with historic resources and restoring buildings and the cost of restoring buildings. So we said, let's form a foundation. So we incorporated in 2023. We got 501c3 status from the IRS in 24. I was elected president in early this year. Kathy Dupree is a vice president. This is our organization at this time. We're still building the board, and it's myself, Kathy, John Healy, Sam Appleton, Drew Lyman, Jesse Tobias, Jack Sanford is the clerk, and Philip Conklin and Associates as our advisors. We realize that's a small group, and we're building this other group that's an advisory council, people with expertise in certain areas that can help lean in, and ultimately these folks are possible, board members, as well as, anyone else that kind of meets the needs of where our organization is going. I'm not going to go over all of these, but we have local people with local interests, local skills, and areas of specialty. Just a couple, like Charlie Conover, that's Dee Dee's grandson, and Charlie's continue to take care of the island in terms of mowing and just taking care of some of the day-to-day stuff out there. Jay Fisher has been tremendous help in helping us see where these construction projects go. Sam Smith, you probably know Smith and May. He's recent, but he knows masonry and brick and rock, and he's been here a long time as well. So our mission: protect, preserve, restore Curtis Island Light Station for current and future generations. It's all about restoring it, preserving it. In our vision, thinking out what would we like this to be. So the Lighthouse Foundation, it mobilizes a dedicated community of volunteers, donors, town officials to safeguard Curtis Island for the next 100 years. Is there a problem up here, Janice? Okay. I wasn't paying attention to that. Has that been off the whole time, or?
No,
No, it just
Oh.
keeps.
periodically on.
Okay. Okay, good. So just briefly on ownership and history. The U.S. government owned it, and various departments took care of it or were responsible for lighthouses in Maine. So without going into a long history, basically, in 1839, the Lighthouse Services owned it. Town of Camden took it over after many moving between Treasury Department and other federal departments. It landed back in Camden. So the Camden got in 1970, got all of the buildings and signed an agreement that they would take care of these buildings and preserve them. It didn't include the light tower. The Coast Guard hung on to that until 1997. The Maine Lights program, which was involved in really saving many, many lighthouses on the coast of Maine, they got involved. And we, the town of Camden, bought it and bought the light tower. The Coast Guard now has access to the tower, and they own the lighting mechanisms and board. First, obviously it was called Negro Island. Here's a painting by John Locke, a very early painting, probably right after it was built in 1835. It was rubble stone, just kind of all rock, and it was all of the buildings, the light tower and the main house was replaced in 1886 to 1896. The current lighthouse is built on the foundation of that rubble stone building, along with an extension that extends out towards the light tower. So new structures at that time, we had the keeper's house, the tower, the barn, the oil shed. We had a boathouse and a dock and a boat slipway. That tower was built in 1896. Again, it replaced the one that was before it, which was suffering from a lot of damage. The first buildings on the island lasted for 50 to 60 years. These buildings have been here almost 135 years. Barn, again, redone. That's as it exists today. The oil shed, every light station has an oil shed. That's picture was taken probably last fall. And there's the old boathouse and boatway. So at any tide, they could slip a boat down the ramp into the water. And it had a dock, what appears to be a high tide dock, probably only landing an hour before and an hour after high tide, but it probably was a place to drop stuff off. Access is critical, and that's one of the things I want to talk about this morning. The access is really, really tough. How many of you have been on the island in the last year? Okay, great. The storms this winter pulled out all the stairways, and luckily Steve and his crew helped rebuild the stairway. There's a fourth order Fresnel lens, and that's located in the town hall. You see it as you come into the Opera House on the elevator side. Hey, can we reactivate it and restore it? I mean, that's kind of one of my pictures. Like, let's get that. And that's been done recently through Coast Guard approvals. And so it is a possibility to put that lens back at some point. 1,000-pound fog bell. I wrote a story about this, trying to figure out where is our fog bell. And we discovered the bell, the Thousand Town bell, it's not the one that's down on the harbor. That, we don't know where that came from, or I don't at this point, but we know that the other one is located on Deer Isle. And in October, the Deer Isle folks are meeting at the Deer Isle Stonington Historical Society. They're meeting, and we're hoping to say, can we do a swap? Can we get our original fog bell back? And, it's just one of those things that's kind of fun to work on, and it would be great to see and restore. Like this middle picture of the woman, looks like it was built probably when the bell was installed, and if I recall, it was about 1840 to 50 when we got this 1,000-pound bell, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful bell. I guess actually it was 1896, and then it got mechanized. It was rung by hand for many, many years, and then they built in a clock mechanism to make it ring. So the place, even though it looks rough, its bones are strong, and we know it can be rebuilt historically accurate, so that it is on the National Register of Historic Places, and our goal is to rebuild it historically. So we're not changing up a lot of things, we're not tearing buildings down, we're restoring what we have here. So as I've come into the harbor, I had a whole series of pictures kind of getting closer and closer. And the closer you get, it starts to look a little ragged. But this was after the December 22 storm, ripped off part of the roof, did internal damage. And I just checked last week, and apparently there's no money from the feds coming from that. Is that right, Jeremy? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we spent a lot of time trying to document what went wrong. And anyway. So here's, some of the fascia boards split away, the paint, because it's absorbing moisture, because the fascia boards and other things, it's putting wetness back into the building. So that's pushing paint back out. So that's why it looks bad.
Is that resulting in, well, I guess we're here to see it. I was gonna say, is that resulting in water actually coming inside the building and landing on floors and stuff?
Yeah, well, when the roof went off in the December 22 storm, that did put water in, and you'll see some pictures of horsehair plaster kind of falling down. Didn't do too much damage. I think we caught it and patched that in time.
And that's been repaired since this.
Yeah, and you'll see other pictures where you can see that it's changed a little bit. Yeah, so that's inside on the stairs, kind of after the ceiling started falling. Plaster on these laths, they're like keys, so they put the cement in and it locks the plaster in. But too much water, that the weight of it pops it out. And there are places where ceiling's been patched. We can see it's been patched before in different parts. The town put up $50,000 or $55,000 a couple of years ago to paint it, and it was during COVID. I got a contractor to come and do work to eliminate all rotting areas, all the visible rot that we could see. And this is, I think, on the northeast corner. He got COVID, couldn't come out, so I've built houses and stuff before, so I brought my gear out and started working on the corner. And as I dug into it, I found dry rot. And I called Audra and I said, it doesn't make sense to paint it. It makes sense to let's do it right. And that was kind of part of the starting of this. That's been that's been temporarily patched. The 4 remaining structures, they're much the same today as they were. What we need to understand the current conditions, develop a historic resource plan. So in December of 2023, I came before the select board, and we talked about, we were thinking of forming the foundation and thinking about a memorandum of understanding saying who's going to do what. And so the select board agreed to one part of this, and this was to do a survey. So the foundation raised half the money. The town took the money from the paint job, and a part of it and put it into a survey. And we hired a company who did the Swans Island Lighthouse, and they're doing the, can't remember the name of it, Olson House, part of the Farnsworth Museum. So they do work kind of only on historic buildings. They're architects, engineers. And so they came in, worked with Gartley and Dorsey as a local team, and we did a survey of the building. And the survey has not been officially released yet. Jeremy and I are going to be getting it to the select board shortly, but this is it. It's two-sided, it's 130 pages, and it goes into huge depth on every issue that the places have. So we did that. We finished it just at the end of July. The town and the Curtis Island Lighthouse Foundation need to develop a second memorandum of understanding. It's just who's doing what as we move forward, who's responsible for what, who's covering liability, who's dealing with volunteers, all the work that's going to be involved in this. So this is the conditions assessment. It's called Historic Building Architects. They're out of Trenton, New Jersey, but they've done a lot of work in Maine. And I met them through Swans Island. We spent time out on Swans Island, and I was thoroughly impressed with the depth of their study and their documentation. So the documentation we have will allow us to go right into metalwork or right into woodwork, or, you know, it's organized according to trades, and that's very helpful. Here's the picture, the cover picture. We were out there in January, not January, it felt like January, in March. It was a tough time. If Pixie was here, he would tell you they helped get myself and a friend off the rocks. A boat got stuck, and there weren't many boats in the harbor. We were out there a couple days before to get ready for the engineers, but it was quite a feat. So I'm going to go through a couple of pages, not go into detail, but know that this is available on our website. This is you'll see the overview, about 10 or 12 pages of the executive summary of the building. But it looks at every, like this was the light tower, looks at all the ironwork, the woodwork, the brickwork, and then documents what's wrong. And so this picture starts to document where things need to happen. One of the biggest, and I'll just try to be faster on each building, but one of the biggest things there is the metalwork, and getting to the metalwork before it gets too rusted. Each building has interior layouts, and then also identifying some of these symbols are cracks in the ceiling, paint, other problems. This is the barn, and the barn is probably the one that needs the most attention. It's a critical part of any light station. It's a critical part of this one. And this barn, the sills on the front, that front sills are gone. If you look at the picture, kind of in the small picture in the middle, we pulled the board up from where the ramp going in. That's what it looks like. So that barn needs to be raised up, new sills put under it, the walls straightened out. It's on a rock wall, rock wall. And some of the problems have been tree growth and stuff around buildings that don't allow the buildings to breathe. And that's certainly the case here. Stuff had grown up around it. It doesn't allow it to dry out between storms, between wetness, and then the mold and all the biologic stuff starts happening. This was the oil house. Again, I thought that was probably in the best shape, and it needs some brickwork. Each building needs really a thorough kind of review, but they're all structurally there. But there's definitely masonry work there and masonry work in the tower. So here's an idea. This just kind of gives you an idea of how we could approach this. So phase one, all the red stuff is stuff that would be done on phase one on the different structures. Or you could take the light tower and look at it vertically and do different things. So this one shows the roof on the office area of the tower just leading into it. That would be done later. It's not, the roof is holding okay there. So again, just to give you a picture, this plan is well organized. Again, here's the tower. It looks at ironwork, brickwork, asphalt, woodwork. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, but each building has its own description, its own analysis. So phase one, preliminary restoration priorities. Some would be the metalwork on the tower. And as a board, and also with Jeremy and Jay Fisher, a few weeks ago, thought maybe the barn is the place to go, do what we need to do to protect the tower, but maybe start with the barn, and that gives us a place to store stuff and a place to use during the process. Our goals for 2024, assessment and preservation plan that I showed you, so that's completed. We have not taken much action on it yet. There's so much detail. And one of the neat things about this, we can separate out what are the things volunteers could do and how much will that save us. It will save us a bundle. Memorandum of understanding with the town, fund development plan that's underway, and that's really what the foundation, one of its primary things is, hey, let's raise some money for this. Begin raising 150 to 200,000 this year. We've raised close to 150 already. Island access plan. This is something that you all will be involved in, but it's a critical part. When you try to get anything onto the island, it's really tough to do that. I mean, it takes a lot of muscle power as it is today, and it's dangerous getting up one set of stairs. So what I'd like to do, there's an opportunity from a grant from the Maine Lighthouse Trust, and that's if you have a lighthouse license plate, I think $10 from each of those goes into this trust, and the trust is now giving money back out to lighthouses and foundations to fix lighthouses. But it's not big money. I mean, it's like 25,000 max probably this year. And so I'm going to go after that to do engineering to get through what would access be, what could it be, and that's where I really need to lean in on you guys and ideas that you have. But I would like to have the sort of an engineered plan, something that we can either activate. How could we use those floats that I came in on the discussion, the floats from Steamboat Landing? Where would they be? How would they be anchored? Then how do you get from the floats, the water level, up to the bank? And that's, all of you who've been out there, it's a steep hike when you're carrying heavy stuff. So that's one I've been talking. I just started talking with Jeremy, or we've talked over the time, but that would be one. And I would see if we put together a plan, it would come through this team, the select board, the state. There's a whole lot of things that have to happen. But we would, and I don't know if I misheard this, but we want that in place for next summer, because we want to start work. We don't want to wait another year for that. If we can raise the money and the town can lean in to it, let's figure that out. A bigger question, a longer term, is what about access? And access is a concern for us. So too much access is going to overrun the island. It's what it is. It's sacred as it is. And how do you kind of keep it that way without having boats dumping 15 or 20 people at a time? And so if we put a series of floats, we need a management system for keeping people off it and maybe making it available only to volunteers and I don't know. I mean, but those are things that we have to figure out, but we definitely need access. There's a lot of money in the budget or the cost on access, and whether it's using helicopters, which I think is out of the question, or getting barge with a big arm to lift stuff up. But then you have to be so organized to get all the stuff up one or two times. So anyway, a lot of things here. Identify sources of in-kind support from the community in the town of Camden. Access contractors, volunteers, material, how do we get that on the island? Preservation, stabilization, avoid future. So one of the things we want to do is how do we minimize the deterioration that's going on today, and how do we protect it? And there's some things we're going to do this fall just to try to seal the buildings up so that further decay doesn't happen. And an ongoing thing is research and documentation and the history, and moving toward at some point, some where kids could come over and have an education plan as part of their curriculum. I mean, there's a whole lot of things. And I know some of our donors already have said, hey, we want education to be part of it in history. And I think it's absolutely core. It's the guts of this wonderful place. Create a volunteer network. We have probably 30 or 40 volunteers now. Problem right now is it takes time and energy to coordinate, that people that are ready to go. And so we're working on that. 2 weeks ago, we had a volunteer day, and one of the biggest problems was the trees that are keeping these places from breathing. And so we did some tree work. That's Rick Seibel up on the ladder up there. Rick's been a great volunteer. So we're trimming out some of these overhanging birch trees, which by themselves are lovely trees, but they're doing significant damage. So that's been cleaned out. And there's a lot more cleaning to do. And then we hauled a lot of stuff down to the shoreline. There's 40, 60 years of stuff that's decayed or isn't useful. And so we hauled that down, and Pixley and his crew came over and hauled it. And then Parks and Rec, I think, hauled it from there to the landfill. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. I think I might have a couple more. So this is our website. We part of what we've been doing this year is developing a website for common information to go to. So it's just www.curtisisland.org. And that brings you right into the website. We're putting history there. We're putting this plan, the executive summary of this plan is there now. So questions, I mean, every time we do something or move it forward, it does open a lot of questions, but it's such a beautiful place. And it's, people keep saying, oh, that's great that you're doing this. And hey, how can we help? And some people are leaning in with dollars and some with their skills. And that's where we need to be going. So thank you for time. Steve?
First of all, thank you for the very thorough explanation. Probably a little premature, but do you have even a ballpark idea of the total cost of the project?
Well, they've estimated it out, and I'd say it's in the millions.
I guess.
Yeah. I don't know what I can say, but Kittery, and the reason I'm hesitating here, it hasn't been socialized with the select board yet, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I'll say a couple of things. The Kittery, there's a lighthouse that was featured in Kittery recently that they reopened. I think they reopened it kind of as a museum. And so this lighthouse they reopened as a museum. I think their cost was like $8 or $9 million. And I'd just say we're significantly under that. So that's all I want to say right now. What we know is if we can deal with the access in the town. We don't just contract all that out, but the town provides in-kind services, provides those flows, puts up hopefully some money, and the foundation raises money to, how do you go from the floats to the upper level there? And even if it's a temporary thing, and how do you design it so maybe the stairs remain, but the easy float access doesn't? But those are questions we really will have to answer going forward.
Upon completion of this project, do you envision it going back to the old system of residents in the building or
Yeah,
being a museum or
Yeah.
what?
personally, we don't know yet, and we haven't, we want to come to the community to ask those questions and kind of get some things. I'm sorry. Here, just a second. So we want to get more community input. But I'll say my personal view is having someone on the island is important. And how you structure that, and I'm looking at a lot of lighthouse renovations, restorations. How do they do it? Some will put a call out, who wants to do this, apply for it, show us all of your skills, carpentry skills, cleaning skills, interpersonal skills, whatever, and come and do that for a year. Some have even doing it for 2 or 3 weeks, but then the burden of reteaching and everything gets crazy. Could we pay for it, or that's another question. Do we pay for that, or say, hey, there are people that want to do it. A lot of people say, hey, let me know when you want to light people. Well, I said, first of all, I'm not the one making that choice, but secondly, we just don't, we're not ready for that. You see, that's an open question. But I do think it's important having someone there, and especially during construction, whether it's going out every day or figuring out a way to, if we're working on the barn, how could we use the caretaker house in a safe way with the existing infrastructure, which is basically nothing, no water, no sewage.
Michael, are there members, are members of the Harbor Committee a part of your group?
No, not yet. Other than Steve, I've been working with Steve on it.
All right, okay,
And I
very
see
good.
that as a need.
Mhm. Well, thank you for your presentation, very
One
polished and
question.
thorough.
We have that magic moment when restoration is done. Is the vision that the foundation is essentially like a long-term tenant from the town? Who's in charge of the day-to-day operation, both in terms of making sure stuff happens and deciding what should be allowed to happen?
I think that's going to be defined in the memorandum of understanding. What role does the town play? Does the foundation play? And we know part of our role is raising the money. The question of who actually does the work, who manages the contracts, who does all of that work needed that's going to be in place to make it all work and make it happen. I don't know if I answered your question.
To be determined, I think.
Yeah.
Because I was first thinking about and I don't know how that has evolved, but you have the Snow Bowl with the Ragged Mountain Foundation, and then you have the town who obviously does all of the day-to-day of it, and whether Curtis Island is envisioned along that mode or more of a, the town technically, I guess, owns the dirt and the structures, but that leasing them out, which are two pretty different formats.
So not until I know where the town sits and what our board wants to do. We're beginning those discussions or getting ready for those discussions.
We've been talking about this for many months, so.
So I appreciate the chance to talking, Steve?
I guess, obviously, one of the most concerning things for this committee is the access issue.
Yep.
So sort of like, where do you see starting with that? What sort of discussion about access? Well, let's start with your end.
Starts today. I mean, I'm ready to go on it because I think it's a critical thing, and I think the town we need to be absolutely paired up in terms of how we're approaching it. And
Right.
so,
So just following up on access, so this would be a land attached float initially, which has to go through the approvals, reviewed by the Harbor Committee, Select Board, Planning Board. So we want to hash out all those, all those things before the plan is developed, right? We got to figure that out. So we're starting that conversation now.
but I would love to have input, or if there's anyone here that's particularly interested in the floats and that access, let me know. What I can see. Steve, you are?
I haven't for years.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see putting together just a small, a small group to say, what are the possibilities? I mean, maybe we should just buy a helicopter, or maybe we should buy a new landing craft like Sam Appleton has, or I don't know. We've got to have a way to do it. And there are a lot of different ways and huge expenses, potential. And we're trying to go for something that works.
I mean, in the draft that was, or the assessment that was done, and they priced things out, and the community will see it all, I think, in very due time. I think it'll happen soon. I mean, a big chunk of that money was access. $1.5 million, as I recall, just to do access to the mountain. And that is not just to get people and their boats to the island, but how to get materials up from there. So I will say that this report that was done is very thoughtful on how they looked at cost estimating. It's real. I mean, I look at a lot of these things, and to me, this is the one document that I've seen that the costs actually seem like they actually make sense, and they're going to be right about where they are. So,
And who's doing this report?
this is the report that the architects did, Historic Architects
Historic
LLC.
Building Architects.
Building Architects. And it's out there. I have a copy of it. The select board doesn't have a copy of it yet, and we haven't chatted with them. So that's why I think Mike was just being a little quiet.
I'm assuming that part of this access can be temporary.
Right. I mean, I think that's the,
Getting equipment and
yeah,
over the hill.
yeah.
I mean, it could be temporary for 3 years or 5 years, whatever it takes. But in the interim, if you've got those stairs going up and a dock that you can pull your power boat up to and hook onto and drop 5 or 6 people, or, that's what will have to be managed.
Right.
Because we just don't want it to become overrun. And that's
I think if you put floats out there with a ramp, I think eventually it could get overrun by lots of people, lots of visitors.
Well, this has always been a conflict about the island, that it's public property.
Right.
And you want some access and you don't want to overrun it.
And I
Right.
think there are a lot of ways to manage it. I mean, the goal is going to be, or the result will be, how do you manage it? And I think you could do 2 or 3 weekends in the summer for a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday. Hey, you can catch a boat here. We'll bring you out. You can be on the island for an hour or two, and we'll bring you back. But it's something organized, so you don't get 50 people at one time.
Like the last century, at one point when I was on the harbor committee, we decided, well, we're going to have a Curtis Island day.
Yeah.
And a bunch of us had small boats and gave people free rides.
Mhm.
Well, someone put it on a Lighthouse Lovers website.
Oh, gosh.
The number of people that showed up were phenomenal.
But that tells you that the public actually wants to go there.
For sure.
That's exactly.
And until the island's ready for lots of people, I think we need to manage it.
So one question I have is on all this forget about the long term,
Uh-huh.
but in the short term, in the 1800s, they figured out how to get the stuff out there to build the stuff we're trying to restore. How did they do that?
That was going to be my point. I was waiting.
Yeah,
my
probably,
turn.
they probably didn't have OSHA back then either.
I've had my hand
Right.
up for a while now, so I'm going to just
Yeah.
take my turn. It would be in keeping historically and with how they had access to transport all the materials for the buildings and the tower. Everything has been done once. They didn't do it on floats.
Helicopters.
They didn't do it with helicopters. The photograph shows a dock that was accessible at high water.
Mhm.
It's high tide twice a day. Sometimes even in the summertime, it's high tide twice during daylight hours.
Mhm.
So access is
Yeah.
not a problem. I think you need to, just for clarity, let's understand the difference between providing pedestrian access and providing access for equipment or
Yeah.
transfer of materials.
Mhm.
When it comes to the transfer of materials, the most efficient way to do it is to go out there at high tide with a barge, bump the barge up to the dock, drive the tractor or the ATV with a trailer loaded with materials right onto the island and take it to where it's going and go back and probably be able to make more than one trip in one tide. So this has been getting done for a very long time. We moved the material for 6 houses out to Monhegan back in the 80s. We could only land at the dock at Monhegan at high water. So as to, well, most importantly was getting the deck of the boat at the same level as the dock.
And
And
then,
also the restriction of draft.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage that we have here in Maine. You can even allow for the barge to ground out if it
yeah, there are
is
places
suitable.
ground
So
out.
I think it's really important that and at some point, if you were to put floats in to provide access to the general public, which I'm not personally in favor of because it puts a lot of burden. It's the challenge that
Mhm.
every state and federal park has been facing since they were formed. How do we protect it? And yet still, the mandate is to protect it and provide access. And those are in oftentimes direct conflict with each other. So that's what we're faced with here. Same thing that every national and state park is faced with. So you're basically you're creating another park. And so we'll be faced with that same challenge. But in terms of between now and when we make a decision about how much access we're going to provide to the public, the immediate challenge is access for transfer of materials. And that is most efficiently and most easily done by bumping a barge up against a platform.
Yeah.
Which doesn't have to be permanent, but if your goal is restoration, then that dock that was constructed to move the materials for the facilities in the first place could be part of the restoration process.
Mhm.
In fact, it's integral to the creation of and the function of the facility in the first place.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't it be critical to the
Reproduce that.
restoration and ongoing function of that same facility?
Okay.
Can I add really quick that on the ballot in November, there is a bond, I think it's bond number 3. I think it's the third bond on the ballot, statewide bonds. That's putting $10 million into historic preservation for municipalities to put on the historic properties. And that's something that the town, I'll be looking at for funding. I assume that will pass, but I'll be looking at funding from that fund to work with the foundation on to.
How much?
There's a $10 million bond that's going to voters November.
State money?
State money.
Uh-huh. The architect's report, what will be the forum for review and discussion of that?
Not quite sure yet. I know the committees or their foundations discussed it. They had an open meeting here I don't know, a month or so ago, that the architect came in and discussed it. They have it on their website. We'll be sharing it with the select board probably this week. And I think Mike's going to be meeting with Susan and probably soon to discuss how that plays out with the select board.
Is it possible for the Harbor Committee to get a seat at that discussion table?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't see why not. You're part of the, I think part of the mix here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, can you
Yeah.
be sure to
I'm sure
advise
Michael will
us
mention
as
that to Susan, and I'll mention it to Susan as
the
well.
opportunities for
Yeah.
that?
We're just trying to figure out the best avenue to really have this discussion with the select board and the community. There's a lot here,
Yeah.
a lot to digest.
Yes,
But
yes.
if I could say one thing, I like that idea because people did, I mean, part of historic preservation sometimes is how did they do it? And that would be interesting. And look at all the huge blocks of granite that have been pulled out of.
I was thinking of a boom like on Crotch Island.
Yeah,
Mhm.
You put a boom on the, because there's a significant elevation
Yeah.
between high tide.
you're not going to go from that
and land.
high tide dock. You've still got 15 or 20 vertical feet to go to
Right.
get up to the flat. So
It was most likely done with a ramp. I mean, they might well have built a wooden ramp that they could drive a tractor down. They probably had a bucket on a tractor, a front end bucket on a tractor was how that
Yeah.
materials got moved in the first place.
Well, I don't want to take more of your time, but I really appreciate this and really appreciate the invitation to come here. And I'd say there's just a lot of good-willed people that are interested in supporting this in a lot of ways. And it's up to us as a community to say, where do we want it to go? You know, what ultimately, it's all fixed up. You know, what do we want? And that's a open question.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. It was very informative, very polished presentation.
Well, thank you. I'll just leave these, you can have them, but we put the Island Lighthouse Journal communication thing, I'll just can pass it around, keep one. And we do it, this is our third edition, so we'll probably have one more this year, but it'll be a way of keeping the community informed. And if you go onto our website, sign up as a volunteer, I mean, put down what you're interested in.
Okay, well, may I have a card? Thank you. Okay. Stephen, thank you for bringing Michael to us. Last item, well, the next item is a discussion about our work plan issues and initiatives. And my intent there was that we could collectively discuss what it is we want to accomplish with the Harbor Committee in the coming months and years. And I've been accumulating my own list of items over the months, and I imagine each of you have your own items. And I'd like for us to share those things so that we can decide what we want to focus on. And that's going to be a big discussion, so it's not going to happen today.
Let's make that the first item next time.
Well, and regarding the next meeting, I would appreciate your input on agenda items, not for every meeting. If there are issues that you feel are important, need to be addressed, I'd like to hear about that. And as far as our next meeting goes, Janice, what are the constraints on October?
Should be October 8th would be the next one, second Tuesday if you're sticking in the same schedule.
Tuesday, the 8th. How do we all feel about Tuesday, the 8th? Okay? Ron?
Yeah, Tuesday, the 8th is fine. I think it's really important that we stick to a known meeting date, the second Tuesday.
Uh-huh. Right, well, this
And
month, SIF
Not,
was,
not to rearrange it to conform with for individuals, people not being able to attend. It's one of the reasons we have two adjunct members, for instance, which worked really well today. For some reason, Mark wasn't able to be here. So I think it's really important that we're consistent about the meeting date.
Okay,
Because I was always, it's not a, it may show up on the town website somewhere if it gets changed to a different date, but it's really hard to find. And so the general public, if they just know it's the second Tuesday of the month,
mhm,
then they can be here.
okay,
I think consistency is important.
okay, very good. So Tuesday, the 8th, 8 a.m. here, and the work plan. I'm kind of curious how you feel about that, defining a work plan for ourselves. Do you think it's important?
Make that part of the conversation when we discuss it.
Okay, thank you, Bob, for your input. Anybody else have anything to say?
I think it's incumbent upon us. And I think that got interrupted when the select board, the chairman of the select board decided that, well, first of all, to disband all committees. And then at some point, the edict was that the Harbor Committee was only allowed to discuss those items which they were assigned to discuss by the select board. That to me is utterly and entirely corrosive of the purpose of committees in the first place. We are people who have some familiarity with an area of expertise regarding the harbor. There are other committees where hopefully people have familiarity with that committee. And it's incumbent upon us to bring the issues that we think are important to the select board, not the other way around. So it's a breath of fresh air to see this transitioning back to the way it was intended to be in the beginning.
If we don't have a work plan, then we're just scattershot reacting to whatever comes up. And
Well, and we don't have an opportunity to prepare. If we have some concept of what's going to be, what it is we're going to be talking about, then we can do our homework.
Okay, well, homework for next meeting, we'll think about what we want to talk about.
And I think it's important too to read the Harbor Administration section, which defines what the Harbor Committee is tasked with doing. It does
In
state
108?
that in 108.
Yeah, right, we have
we have
mandated,
That's true too.
we have mandated responsibilities.
Right.
We
Defined.
did talk last meeting about everybody sort of trying to review the ordinance and see if they found problems, conflicts, suggestions, etc.
Yes, yes,
I found one.
that's a big,
Found a few.
Okay, so has everyone been sworn in?
Richard says
Everyone but Richard. I think.
everyone but Richard.
I don't, does an alternate doesn't.
You should,
No, they do.
you
Oh,
do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then,
Oh,
Katrina could take care of you this morning.
you gotta see Katrina.
He's very good.
You just sign and give a point of blood.
Uh-huh.
So Elliot, how do we proceed with, I had a recommendation for an agenda item, which I brought up at the last meeting, and it's not on today's agenda, other than it's somewhere in the
Well, it was buried.
issues and
Yes,
initiatives.
that's right. Okay, well, then that.
So I didn't bring it up at the non-agenda item period because I thought it would be discussed later, but it's getting late in this. We've been here 2.5 hours already, so I think it's probably not appropriate to approach it now, but is there some chance that we can have a conversation or
Yes,
I'm making a specific request. Let's put it
okay,
that way.
I hear it.
I would like to have a conversation about why the channel is not in compliance with the description in the harbor ordinance.
Okay, that will be on the agenda. We'll have the discussion.
And now that everybody knows that, they can go down and stand at the easterly corner of the yacht club, look at the day beacon on the inner ledges off of Northeast Point, and witness for themselves where the channel was described to be. As
Bay
opposed,
Beacon, the one that's close to the ledges, not the one, the red one that's the tower.
that's not a day beacon. That's a lit mark. A day beacon is not lit. And it's the day beacon on the inner ledges, which is how it's labeled on the chart as inner ledges off Northeast Point.
Didn't somewhere I see a sketch where
I
maybe
gave,
you put it?
I had it, I handed it out. I have more if you need another one.
Yeah.
The Bay Beacon, is that the one?
It
that
would be
the
good if
Osprey
you could
nest is
send
on?
us an email with what you said.
Aren't they on both of them?
I'll-
Well, the green square, is that what you're talking
I
about?
believe the green is the day beacon. Is that right, Ron? Green?
The day beacon.
Right, that's what I'm asking, yes.
Yep. So you didn't get one of these?
It's my next door neighbor.
Oh,
The
is
stress
that right?
nest.
The Osprey.
All right.
This,
I just want to thank you guys again for having me and
I'll
hearing
get
me.
another one, but I think I did have one.
I'm not
It's really a
sure.
blessing too.
We're running low. I want to make sure Bob has
Thank
one.
you for coming and spending the time with us.
If you have any,
I think you got some feedback that you can.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
I'll hope to come back next month and update and just get a little bit more. I want to stay, like I said, in good standing with the
Mhm.
people that matter in the harbor. And that
Okay.
seems
Yeah,
like
but
this
no,
is-
So Ron, I'm not remembering.
Not for the whole meeting, you know, I don't want to make it a continual item that you guys have to worry about. but
they,
Just maybe 10 minutes to
It's an Osprey nest.
update you all
Tower, you know,
and,
this one's-
get anything that would be
it's a day,
urgent or pressing
it's
for me in the short
a-
term,
the,
of course.
it's a day beacon or a day marker,
So
but it's
you'd like to be
it's the
included.
spindle
Okay.
on the inner
Provided.
ledges.
I got it.
Yeah, because it doesn't refer to it as
Okay.
a buoy.
And I'm talking
It
with
refers to
Steve,
it
but
as,
this issue with
as a
dockage
day beacon.
is,
And this line is
Immediate,
supposed to be the
right?
center of the.
Like-
tower.
I had gathered.
yeah, this is
That,
something.
that line would pretty much represent the
Lynn,
whole channel
she's-
because of
where
the
she's
width
at
of
now, she's liable
the,
to
yeah.
And
do
this is
pick
the
up a
existing
fluke again.
No.
It's not
No, that overlay,
That she'll
those
just find her way
Those
through the channel and around.
pink
Curtis Island,
lines
which
are,
last time. It was,
what's referred to as the Anchorage A and Anchorage B.
went out and didn't end up on the rocks.
Why that doesn't coincide with the channel is a function of what the federal government decided
This
to
needs to happen.
claim as their responsibility to maintain.
We can get it to the select board.
The select board meets today as well.
No, but you don't have time to do that.
Okay.
You'll have to be on a future agenda, so.
The channel as it's marked right now, as the key
It
says in
sounds
the
like there's a
bottom,
spot,
is
you
the
know,
black
the
line.
Swift is there now, but the Swift could fit next door.
Yeah.
And-
I leave that stuff to Steve, and then the select board
Yes.
needs to
Okay.
work with Steve.
Okay.
That
Meeting
is,
adjourned.
as
Okay.
But you can